This entire stone ruin is coming down tomorrow to make way for the back nine of my new golf course. Pack up your garbage and get the hell off my property." The heavy-set head contractor, a man who wore his newfound wealth like an ill-fitting suit, barked the order as his face flushed red with artificial authority. Without waiting for a response, he snatched the worn-out tour guide cap right off Sophie's head and threw it face down into a thick puddle of brown mud. The heavy diesel engines of 3 massive bulldozers idled right behind him, blowing thick black smoke into the crisp morning air, ready to tear down centuries of history in a matter of hours. Sophie stood her ground, her small frame trembling, spreading her arms wide to shield the group of terrified orphans huddled behind her, just a few yards away. Standing near the edge of the old courtyard and blending in perfectly with the sparse crowd of onlookers, a single father, in a faded corduroy jacket, gently pulled his little girl closer to his side. He didn't panic. He didn't yell. His eyes just turned ice cold. While the contractor continued his arrogant rant, the father quietly reached into his pocket, pulled out a bulky, military-grade satellite phone, and hit a single speed dial button. He spoke just loud enough for the microphone to catch his voice. Over the roaring engines. "Cancel all construction permits for the South Peninsula project. Immediately. Hello, friends. The heritage built by the hands of our ancestors is a sacred treasure of the soul. If you believe in what is right, please leave this vow in the comments. I believe truth always prevails over every dirty trick. To give strength to the truth today. And do not forget to subscribe to the channel to walk with us through stories that heal the heart." The ancient stone castle had stood on that coastal cliff for over 300 years. For the rest of the world, it was just an outdated pile of rocks, taking up prime real estate. But for Sophie, it was a sanctuary. She was a 23-year-old history student who spent every weekend working as an unpaid tour guide, maintaining the grounds by herself, and using the space as a makeshift outdoor classroom for kids from the local group home. She didn't have much money, but her heart was a roaring fire of dedication. She wanted these children, who had been abandoned by society, to know that they had roots, that they belonged to a place with a rich, enduring history. Now, standing in front of the massive yellow machines, her fiery spirit was being tested by the cold, hard reality of corporate greed. Marcus, the lead developer for the South Peninsula project, sneered at her defiance. He was a man who believed that every problem in the world could be paved over with enough cash. He looked at Sophie's mud-stained boots and the terrified children clinging to her cheap windbreaker with absolute disgust. To him, they were just insects, standing in the way of a multi-million-dollar luxury resort. Off to the side, completely ignored by Marcus and his crew, Richard crouched down to be at eye level with his 7-year-old daughter, Lily. He adjusted her little knitted beanie against the coastal wind. Lily looked up at him with wide, worried eyes, pointing a small finger at the angry man. Yelling at the nice tour guide, Richard offered her a warm, reassuring smile. He had brought her here on a humble weekend road trip, dressed in plain, thrift store clothes, because he wanted her to see the world without the distorting filter of immense wealth. "Dad, why is that man so mean to her? Why does he want to break the castle?" Lily whispered, gripping her father's sleeve. Richard gently brushed a stray curl behind her ear. "You see those stones, sweetheart? They have stood through terrible storms, freezing winters, and blazing summers. They are strong because they have a deep foundation. That man over there, he only sees the dirt on the outside. He thinks because he has a shiny truck and a lot of paper money, he is stronger than the stones. But true value isn't about what shines on the outside, it's about what you preserve on the inside." He wanted her to understand that character was built exactly like this castle, brick by brick, weathering the storms, never compromising its foundation. Their quiet moment was suddenly interrupted. Marcus, having grown tired of yelling at Sophie, turned around to scan the area and locked eyes with Richard. Seeing a guy in a scuffed-up jacket giving a life lesson on his construction site rubbed Marcus the wrong way. He marched over, his heavy work boots crunching loudly against the gravel. "Hey, pal, didn't you hear me say the tour is over?" Marcus snapped, Pulling a thick leather money clip from his pocket, he peeled off a crumpled $50 bill and tossed it directly at Richard's chest. It fluttered in the wind and landed in the dirt near Richard's worn-out sneakers. "Do yourself a favor. Take your kid, go buy her some ice cream, and get off my property before I have my security guys throw you out for trespassing. I don't have time to deal with you local charity cases today." Sophie, seeing Marcus turn his aggression toward an innocent father and child, felt a surge of protective anger. She stepped forward, pulling a folded, desperately crumpled legal document from her back pocket. "You can't do this," she cried out, her voice cracking but loud enough to turn heads. "I filed an emergency preservation injunction with the Historical Society yesterday. The castle is officially under review. You don't have the legal right to run those bulldozers. Until the hearing next month." Marcus stopped. He slowly turned his head back to Sophie, a cruel, mocking grin stretching across his face. He walked up to her, snatched the paper from her trembling hands, and didn't even bother to read it. Right in front of her eyes, and in front of the horrified orphans, he ripped the document down the middle. Then he tore it again, and again, letting the tiny white pieces scatter into the wind like snow. "Listen to me, you naive little girl," Marcus growled, leaning in close so she could smell the stale coffee and entitlement on his breath. "In this county, the South Peninsula Global Real Estate Group is the law. We own the mayor. We own the zoning board. And we own this dirt. A piece of paper isn't going to stop a $50 million project." He turned to his foreman and raised his hand, signaling him to drop the bulldozer blades. The massive steel buckets hit the ground with a deafening crash, shaking the earth beneath their feet. Right in the midst of this absolute despair, when dirty money seemed ready to crush the very breath out of justice. "Do you believe a miracle can happen? Please write the words. I believe truth always prevails over every dirty trick." To see exactly how this quiet father flips the entire game upside down, Richard did not bend down to pick up the $50 bill. He didn't even look at it. He calmly reached over and placed his hands gently over Lily's ears to protect her from the roar of the engines and the ugliness of Marcus's words. He gave her a soft nod, telling her silently that everything was under control. Then, Richard stood up to his full height. He wasn't a very large man, but the sudden shift in his posture carried a weight that made the air around him feel instantly heavier. He took one slow, deliberate step forward, walking right past the $50 bill in the dirt, and stopped inches away from Marcus. "So, you work for the South Peninsula Global Group," Richard said. His voice was not loud, but it possessed a terrifyingly calm authority that sliced right through the noise of the machinery. Marcus puffed out his chest, trying to maintain his intimidation tactic. "That's right, buddy. And unless you want a free ride in a police cruiser, I suggest you take my advice and walk away." He had absolutely no idea that the unassuming father standing in front of him was Richard Sterling, the billionaire founder and chairman of the board of the exact global empire he was just bragging about. Marcus laughed, a deep, booming sound that echoed off the ancient stone walls. You're giving me orders? Look at your shoes. Man, you look like you just crawled out of a dumpster." Richard didn't flinch. He didn't raise his voice or try to prove himself. He simply kept his eyes locked on Marcus and waited. 10 seconds passed, then 20. The heavy silence began to feel thicker than the diesel smoke in the air. Suddenly, the piercing ring of a cell phone broke the tension. It wasn't Richard's old satellite phone. It was the sleek, expensive smartphone in Marcus's front pocket. Marcus rolled his eyes, pulled it out, and checked the screen. His annoyed expression instantly vanished, replaced by a look of sheer confusion. It was the chief financial officer of the South Peninsula Global Group. Marcus answered the call, clearing his throat to sound professional. "Yes, sir. We are right on schedule. The demolition is about to begin." There was a pause. Marcus's face suddenly went entirely pale. "What do you mean? All accounts are frozen? Halted?" "Sir, we have bulldozers idling on the dirt right now." "Who gave that order?" Marcus listened to the voice on the other end. His eyes slowly widened in absolute horror. The phone slipped from his sweaty fingers and hit the gravel with a sharp crack. He slowly turned his head back to the quiet man in the faded corduroy jacket. Before Marcus could even stammer out a word, the heavy, rhythmic thumping of helicopter blades chopped through the morning air. A sleek black corporate chopper crested the cliffside, the South Peninsula logo shining on its tail. It descended rapidly, kicking up a massive storm of dust and forcing the construction crew to shield their eyes. The moment the landing skids touched the grass, the cabin door slid open. A man in a sharp, tailored suit stepped out, clutching a leather briefcase. He ignored the bulldozers, ignored the crew, and walked straight toward Richard. When he was 3 feet away, the man stopped, bowed his head respectfully, and handed Richard a thick folder. "Mr. Sterling, the project has been officially canceled, and the subsidiary accounts have been locked, as you requested." A collective gasp ripped through the crowd of onlookers. Sophie covered her mouth, her eyes darting between the billionaire and his little girl. Marcus fell to his knees, in the dirt. His legs simply couldn't support his weight anymore. All of his arrogant bluster, all of his fake authority, evaporated into the cold morning wind. "Mr. Sterling, I had no idea. I was just following the company timeline. Please. I have a family." Richard looked down at him. "You didn't care about the families of these children. You didn't care about the history of this land. You only cared about the power you thought your money gave you. You are fired, Marcus. Effective immediately. But before you leave my property, you are going to walk over to that mud puddle. You are going to pick up that young woman's hat. You are going to brush the dirt off it, hand it back to her, and apologize." Marcus scrambled on his hands and knees through the gravel. He picked up the muddy tour guide cap, his hands shaking violently as he tried to wipe the grime off on his expensive pants. He held it out to Sophie, refusing to make eye contact, and mumbled a broken apology. Arrogance and cruelty always come with a heavy price. Richard used his financial power not to destroy, but to protect what was right. Please comment. I believe truth always prevails over every dirty trick. To celebrate Sophie's courage today, Richard took the folder from his assistant and walked over to Sophie. He pulled a gold pen from his jacket pocket and quickly signed the bottom of the first page. He handed the document to her. "What is this?" Sophie asked, her voice still trembling from the shock. "It is the deed to this land," Richard said softly. "I just bought it from the development board. It now belongs to a newly formed non-profit preservation trust. And you, Sophie, are the executive director. Nobody will ever threaten this castle or these children again." Sophie burst into tears, dropping to her knees to hug the orphans, who were now cheering and jumping with joy. Later that evening, the heavy bulldozers were gone, replaced by the peaceful sound of the ocean waves crashing against the cliffs. The golden sunset bathed the ancient stone walls in a warm, healing light. Lily was running across the grass, playing tag with her new friends. Richard stood by the old castle gates, watching his daughter laugh. Sophie walked up beside him, a look of profound gratitude in her eyes. "I don't know how I can ever repay you," she whispered. Richard turned to her, his cold, authoritative demeanor completely gone, replaced by the gentle warmth of a father. "You already did. You showed my daughter that there are still people in this world willing to stand in front of a bulldozer for what they believe in." He reached out and gently took her hand. It wasn't a grand cinematic proposal, but the beginning of something deeply real and grounded in shared values. The dirty tricks of human greed will always burn to ash in the face of genuine love and unwavering conviction. Those who have the courage to plant seeds of kindness, even in the hardest soil, will always witness miracles grow. Please subscribe to our channel right now to warm your soul with more stories like this. And leave your vow. I believe truth always prevails over every dirty trick, as your own personal declaration of faith in humanity.